Hi again, Mark here from Talking Bass. Last week I posted the video that you just saw of my recent collaboration with the awesome Ariane Cap. We learned Bach's second prelude from the Well Tempered Clavier, which is an incredibly well-known piece in keyboard repertoire. She took the right hand, I took the left hand, so this week I'm going to provide the notation for my part, show you how we arranged it and give you some pointers on playing the piece. The part is all there over at Talking Bass, so just follow the link in the info below, and while you're there, check out the lesson map where you'll find over 350 free lessons on every aspect of bass playing, all organised for ease of navigation. Then, if that floats your boat, be sure to check out the premium courses we have on everything from reading music, to scales, chord tones, ear training, slapping, and much, much more. So just click on the link below and it's all there on the Talking Bass website. Okay, so let's take a look at how I created and learned the part for this piece. First, we needed the sheet music. Now, I already have the complete Well Tempered Clavier in book form, but I wanted to be able to create two separate bass parts in Finale, so I needed to get the music in some computer format, which meant I could either manually copy it out by hand or find a copy of it somewhere else. The best file format for this is XML, and there are a ton of websites hosting classical XML files that can be imported into a variety of programs like Finale or Sibelius. I downloaded a copy from musescore.com, which I could then import into Finale, and hey presto, we can edit to our heart's content. Next, it was just a case of deciding which parts to delete. Now, this piece is pretty much divided into 3 or 4 sections. It's in the key of C minor, and we start with the long opening section. This is both hands locked in together in 16th notes, working through the harmony in broken chords. This finally reaches a climax with the outline of 3 arpeggio-based lines, and then the next section is labelled as Presto or fast, and again works through a series of broken chords, together again in 16th notes. This leads into the slow adagio section, where we have a short melody played over 2 chords in the left hand before completing the piece in a weaving allegro melody. So the first thing that we had to decide was how to divide the piece up between the 2 basses. The opening section is obvious, 1 bass for each hand. Ariane plays 6-string bass beautifully, so it makes sense that she takes the top line in the higher register. For the arpeggios, we decided to turn that into a question and answer section. Ariane, me, Ariane. The ordering was important for leading into the fast Presto section. For the Presto, just as in the first section, we can allocate a bass to each hand. Same for the adagio. I can play the lower chords while Ariane plays the melody. Then the final allegro had to be divided up as question and answer again. Ariane for the first bar, me for the second, and Ariane for the third. So once we decided on this, I could delete any unnecessary notes from my part in the software, copy the remaining notes onto one staff, and that's it. Print out the part, and off we go. Now, I've tabbed out the fingering positions that I made use of in eventually learning the piece, but be aware, neither of us were reading tab at any point. We simply read the music. When learning a piece like this, I'd advise taking it slowly and learning a bar at a time. Don't just try and read through the whole thing. When adapting keyboard music to bass guitar, you're likely to spend quite a lot of time working on different fingerings and positions for a single set of notes. I'll work on one bar, trying out different ways of playing it until I find the most comfortable and most likely to represent the music. So if we take the very first bar as an example, I'd read the notes C, G, F, G, and then E flat, G, F, G. Now there are multiple ways of playing that. I could play it here at the 3rd fret of the A string. I could play it at the 8th fret of the E string. I could play the E flat in 2 different places. I could play there, or I could use the open G string. You know, there's many different ways of playing it, and all of these things will make a huge difference to the sound of the piece and how we shift from one bar to the next. Now, it's important to note that the way that you learn it on first reading might change as you progress through the piece, so you might have to alter it. You might suddenly realize that playing in a certain position at the start causes problems as you move into further positions. So I might start down here at the 3rd fret of the A string, but then I find that I don't like the natural shift down to the B flat, maybe down here at the 1st fret of the A string with the open strings. I might not like that a few bars later. So I can reveal here that I finally decided on starting up at the 8th fret position because it made things way easier for shifting downwards. I wanted to avoid open strings where possible to give me more consistency to the tone and attack and to provide more control over the notes at high speed. Okay, so let's just work through the first few bars to give you some tips on learning this first section. Now, we've already looked at the first bar. We had C, G, F, G, and E flat, G, F, G. Now, we know we're in the key of C minor by the key signature, so here we're outlining a C minor arpeggio. C, E flat, and G. And we've got the inclusion of that neighbor note, the F. So if you can spot familiar patterns like arpeggios in a piece, it makes learning and memorization way easier. Also, look for repeating patterns. So here we have a 2-beat motif, and we repeat it. And this same pattern of repeating the motif continues almost exclusively through the first section. So that's good to know. So for the most part, we're learning 8 notes for every bar. So let's play round and round on the first bar and we'll look at the technique in there. Now, in terms of the notes, in terms of the frets, we've got the C 8th fret of the E string, then the G at the 10th fret of the A string, then that F at the 8th fret of the A string, and then back to the G at the 10th fret of the A string. So that's the first part, and I'm using the 1st and 3rd fingers there on the fretting hand. Then I'm using the 4th finger, the pinky there, for the E flat at the 11th fret of the E string, and then we repeat the G, F, G. So 10th fret, 8th fret, 10th fret on the A string. And that's the pattern, that's the motif. So you want to get that under your fingers first of all. And I'm using a 1-finger per fret system here, so I've got the 1st finger over the 8th fret and then the 4th finger over the 11th fret and, you know, 1 finger per fret in between. So you can just play around on that, get it under your fingers, play it as slow as you need to, and just get used to playing round on it. I'm curling the fingers there, which helps a lot with avoiding that flappy hand kind of thing. So curl them over quite a bit. Just play round and round on that bar until you've really got it under your fingers, until you're 100% there with it. In terms of a few other technical tips, you want to keep that thumb right there in the back of the neck, and you can use that as a pivot when you need to stretch up, maybe to catch that E flat. You also want to keep each note played for its full duration, so no staccato notes in here, so no, you know, you want each note to lead into the next. It's not legato, but we are playing full duration, okay? So ba, 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 ba. No ba, ba, ba. None of that. You want fluidity and consistency in the line. For the picking hand, I'm alternate picking and starting with the first finger, so that's the index finger. So the fingering used becomes absolutely key to your practice as you continue, because you want consistency. Once you have a good layout of the notes, once you've mapped it all out, you want to be practicing the same thing every time in both hands. If you don't play with the same picking pattern, then you're not practicing the same piece from a finger perspective. Sometimes players, especially beginners, will focus too much on the notes in the left hand and just allow the picking hand to do what it wants on autopilot. Now that's fine a lot of the time, especially in simple pieces of music, but in a fast, incessant classical piece like this, you need to have everything planned out. You don't need to know, the finger used for every single note, but you want to know when you're alternate picking, which finger you're starting on for each phrase, and which notes are going to be raked. That way, you're repeating the practice of all the physical movements in there rather than only those of the fretting hand. So that's the first bar, and you just continue learning each successive bar in the same way. Take bar number 2, we're outlining the F minor chord over C. We keep the same one finger per fret fingering position there, and then you just learn the notes in there. So we're starting on the C there, 8th fret of the E string. Then we've got the A flat and the G there, 11th fret and 10th fret on the A string. Back to the A flat, then the F at the 8th fret of the A string. And then A flat, G, A flat, 11th fret, 10th fret, 11th fret. So it's a very repetitive motif. Again, start out as slow as you need to. Some of you might have problems with the pinky in there, but over time this will really build up the strength in there. Again, alternate picking and starting on that first finger. Just practice it round and round. That becomes an exercise in its own right. Okay? Once you've played that bar round and round for a while, you've got it under your fingers, you can put both of those 2 bars together. So we start. Now bar 3 is the same as bar 2, so we just repeat that. And then we reach bar 4, which sounds like this. So we're back in a C minor here, and we have C, 8th fret of the E string. So we've then got E flat to D and back to E flat, which is the 11th fret and 10th fret on the E string. Then the G, 10th fret of the A string. And then back to the E flat, D, E flat, 11th, 10th, 11th frets on the E string. Again, very repetitive motif. So once you've got that bar down, you can play round and round once you've got those notes under your fingers. And one thing that I ought to mention about this particular bar is that it might feel a little bit weird at first, because you're actually crossing over the strings onto the next adjacent string, moving upwards with the first finger, and that can often feel a little bit weird. We become used to playing with the longer finger when we're crossing up the strings. So if we're moving from E string to A string, it feels more natural to play first finger than second finger, because the second finger is longer. But when you play second finger, first finger, it feels a little bit odd, because you're playing with the longer finger first and then moving up with the shorter finger, okay? So that will play a huge part in learning pieces like this. You're constantly trying to get used to maybe moving across with the first finger, or avoiding that by changing the pattern. So here, we've got a very basic example of that. So nothing too bad, but we are moving across onto the A string with that first finger. So once you've got bar 4 down, add it to the rest. Okay, so that's the first bars, and like I said, look for repeating patterns, look for familiar patterns, look for arpeggios in there. So it's all based around this C minor arpeggio there, okay? So the first time, you can see the notes of the C minor in there, the C, the E flat, and the G, and then for that second and third bar, we're working around this F minor here, and then we're back working around the C minor arpeggio, just with that little neighbor note in there, the second. So from that point on, you just continue adding a bar at a time. So if I just work through. Up the octave. And it works down in this descending fashion. Okay, so we work down descending in that way. Now, the only problem that you're really going to run into when you're doing this is that you're going to have these little jumps with the first finger. So if, as we work down, oops, I'm there on the first finger, and then I'm now on the second finger for the C down here on the E string. But then that jump down to the B flat, I'm coming down on the first finger. So I'm switching from that second finger to the first, because the first finger was up here on the A natural, and now it has to jump down. And that might seem a little bit tricky to get used to at first, because you've got to make this sudden jump. So, okay, you see there that the first finger's there up on that D string, and then jump, okay? Again, same move. So we're just getting used to this sudden jump with the first finger. Now, the majority of this section involves strict alternate picking, but there are a few places that I should point out where I do rake to accommodate the patterns that I'm using in the fretting hand. Now, when we reach the A flat down here for this pattern, I rake from the F down to the D, so the 3rd fret D string down to the 5th fret on the A string. So I start on the first finger, and then I rake down from the F to the D. And what happens when I do that is that I switch to the second finger for the opening note. So see there, when I got back down to the A flat, I'm on the second finger, which might feel a little bit odd to some of you because I'm jumping back again with that second finger, the longer finger, and it can feel a bit weird, but it does make things a lot easier and feel a lot more natural when you're playing on the higher strings. So, and then I'm now on the second finger as my first, all the way through here. Again there, starting on that second finger. Then when I get to this E flat, I have to do the same thing. To switch to the first finger. So I rake from the G there down onto the F, so 5th fret D string down to the the 8th fret of the E string. So, and I'm now on the first finger as the starting finger. So that then switches it so that all the next bars are going to be starting on the first finger. Then when I get to the C down here, I do the same thing. I switch. Okay, so again I rake, and that brings me back. So now I'm on the second finger as the starting finger, and I stay on that all the way through the rest of that section. So just work through each of those passages in isolation and in a progressive manner. Bar 1, get it down. Bar 2, get it down. Join them up, and so on. This whole section is a real test of the stamina in the fretting hand, and I pretty much guarantee that you'll be getting a little burn in the forearm as you approach the arpeggios. The key to making it through is relaxation. Don't play too hard and stay relaxed at all times. For the arpeggio section, Ariane takes 2 of the 3, so we just need to learn this one line. So the notes are all shown on screen, and you can find them in the music over at TalkingBass. And we're basically outlining a C minor arpeggio starting on the 5th, the G. So just build it up a few notes at a time, and be sure to start on the second finger of the picking hand. So maybe take the first 4 notes. You know, we're working up there, G, C, E flat, G. It's just a C minor arpeggio starting there on the 5th. Now, one thing worth pointing out here is that I made use of an open string to facilitate the shift up into the higher position. So this is really useful when moving at high speed. So I come up, and instead of playing the G here at the 5th fret of the D string, I play the open string. And then I can just shift up, so. So I've got a lot more time to actually make the shift rather than being stuck down here in this hand position. So this is pretty much a get out of jail free card. So it's handy that there's a G there. If it wasn't in this key, then I probably wouldn't have that choice. But because it is, and because there is a G there, it's very easy to make that shift. For the rest of the piece, you can just work through the music that I've provided. The Presto section is a real workout, and when playing along with Ariane, we both have to be absolutely on point, otherwise things can start to get messy. To line the 16th notes up at high speed while shifting around, you have to be 100% confident in the notes that you're playing. So don't worry about playing along to anything until you have the notes well and truly memorized. I arranged the notes in the Presto section so you can both see and feel the descending patterns. I've also placed them in those positions to allow for alternate picking throughout. Some other positions that I tried would have forced me into raking at certain points, which is fine, but you know, again, I wanted consistency throughout the section. That always helps with working through at speed, so the whole line looks like this when played slowly. The chords in the next section are just a C7 and a second inversion F minor chord, so nothing too tricky in there. Then for the final line, I start by holding the major 7th interval here of C and B before playing through the following line. In this line, I arranged it so that it would be physically descending down the neck rather than within one area, and I find this helps, for me anyway, with memorizing the line, and I can also make use of a few slides in there to add a little bit of interest. Okay, so I've got a few little slides in there. And then we finish off proceedings with this held C, G and C, which is a good old power chord, which I hold while Ariane plays the final melodic phrase. And that's it, but be sure to hold that chord down and don't let up until the last gasp of Ariane's final note. If you don't break at the same time, it can sound a little messy. So, as you can imagine, performing this piece on completely separate continents was slightly problematic. There are multiple tempo changes, and if we were to play to a click track, things could sound slightly robotic. Ariane recorded her part first and inserted 2 click track sections where I would be playing solo. I then just played over the top of her part live on video, sent her the video and audio separately, so we could then reassemble everything minus the click. All in all, I think it's worked out quite well, and I'm pleasantly surprised at how well the 2 lines are locked, considering we had no way of playing off each other in the same room with an organic live feel. Okay, so if you want to play along, the sheet music and tab is all there over at TalkingBass. Just follow the link in the info below, and while you're there, sign up for the free membership where you'll find a ton of free practice resources like the 25 Bass Groove Challenge. Okay, I'll see you next week.